Hello, I'm Nan Simonson, and I have a message that I feel so compelled to get out because of a situation that I'm in right now. I have a loved one whom I dearly adore, a family member, younger than me. I'm almost 72, and he just turned 70, well, 71, 70. Anyway, and he's in the hospital, has been for days, and the more he's there, the more they find. And he's a brilliant, um, almost musical genius. And so he's lived a life of creativity. But in that life of creativity, he has spent a lot of time and attention creating and not paying attention to certain things like health. Um, and he has eaten whatever he has wanted to eat and not moved much and gotten larger and larger, and he's in the hospital, and I'm so worried. Uh, and then I heard this podcast, and I thought, you know what? Yes, I have the right to say to him, if you hate this enough, because he's hating every day, if you hate this enough, you can decide this will never happen again, and you can do something about it. And you know what? That's true. And this podcast that I'm about to give you notes from um, has everything to do with that. I wrote Aging Powerfully. Accept your past. There's part memoir here. Take control of your future and find vibrant health, balance, and joy. And the the book is about, through lifestyle choices, deciding where we were going to go health wise and how we were going to do it. And at almost 72, I have found a way to live a much younger life than I ever would have at this age, because I'm going on 5 years now as a health and wellness coach with Lifestyle Medical under Dr. Dysinger, the founder, who is also a founding member of the College of Lifestyle Medicine, seeing again and again and again and again patients who have come so broken that they were critical, almost go home and get your things in order, critical, who have overcome all of that with lifestyle choices. I was, more than 4 years ago, in that situation where all these things were going wrong. The super high cholesterol, the cardiovascular markers that led them to say you've got to be on statins, the gallbladder so crummy they said we're taking it out, the autoimmune diseases, the pre-diabetes, you need to be on metformin. In other words, the black hole had opened. I was about to fall in, and I said no. I had finished my coaching training, health coach training, and I knew there was a better way. And then I was asked to be a health coach at this facility, which was the best thing that could have happened, because it showed me what the power of lifestyle medicine is, as opposed to simply prescriptions and procedures, which is part of the allopathic way of dealing with illness. So let me get into what I'm going to be sharing with you today, because it simply reinforces my very strong feelings about this situation that I began with, and that is that regardless of where we are health-wise, we can mitigate it if we will finally understand the importance of our decisions. So this conversation was it was on the Rich Roll podcast on October 31st, so Halloween Day, and he was interviewing gastroenterologist Dr. Robynne Chutkan. He had interviewed her 7 years prior for her book, The Microbiome Solution. And then, as you may know, a couple of years ago, Dr. Will Bolshewitz wrote Fiber Fueled. And I have her book, and I have his book, and I've been all over and all about the power of the microbiome. But I learned so much from this conversation. She went on to write another book. Well, actually, it was first Gut Bliss was the one that she wrote 7 years ago, followed a couple of years later by the Microbiome Solution. And now this new book is entitled Tools to Boost Immunity. No, I'm sorry. The podcast title is Tools to Boost Immunity and Prevent Disease. Her new book is called The Antiviral Gut. Well, what is the virus that's on the tip of everybody's tongue right now? Of course, COVID. This is November, whatever it is today, the 5th of 2022. We are going on, 2.5 years of COVID, and the darn thing's morphing all over the place. And there are new outbreaks because of a new infection, and it seems that this will be part of our reality, maybe forever. And so, what are we going to do about it? This book offers insights that few of us have been exposed to, and relates to what the effects of our health, and it's full actionable. It's full of actionable information. There are even recipes from a gastroenterologist, as there was in her last, well, I think both books. So Ritual began with the question, where is my immune system? Because we're talking about the immune system. We're talking about an antiviral gut. Gut and immunity go hand in hand, as I'm going to repeat a couple of times here. And he said, where is the immune system? Can you locate it the way you can locate a pancreas? And Dr. Chutkan noted that 70 to 80% of our immune system is located in the gut, especially our large intestine, called the colon, where you'll find the most of the microbiome. Our microbiome is really everywhere. It's in our ears, it's in other orifices, it's on our skin. But the active part that's encased and working like another organ, a 3 to 5 pound in weight organ of microbes, is what we call that microbiome in our gut. There are two parts, and this is Dr. Chutkan explaining this. There are two parts to the immune system. The innate immune system is the one that we're born with, that heals, cuts, and goes to work to protect us from invading pathogens. And then there's an adaptive or acquired immune system. That's what we develop over time. It responds to invaders or damage, but it also remembers and then recognizes past organisms. It remembers them and releases antibodies to fight them. So she noted that it's the adaptive immune system that is also the basis of vaccines. In other words, small amounts of the pathogen is introduced, enough for the body to then create antibodies that can fight a larger load later on. And this also applies to when we have, any disease, and we are given, or when we have the disease and the disease then becomes less, we're more protected. In other words, less dangerous, we're more protected because we do have the antibodies from having gotten the disease. We can't talk about the immune system and not talk about the gut. If the gut bacteria are off, if they're not healthy, if the population is rich with unhealthy bacteria, a healthy immune system or a healthy immune response will not be triggered. So again, if we're looking at the antiviral gut, the wellness-based gut, but especially as it relates to the immune system, the two go hand in glove. So what is our gut? It's that long hollow tube from our mouth to our anus. The gut lining is a very thin, microscopically thin layer, like a net, but with tiny, tiny holes, tiny, tiny holes. The gut is part of the outside world. So when you eat something, more than any other orifice you have, when you eat something, that tube carries it throughout your body, but it's still part of the outside world until it's assimilated into our bodies through that lining. The pathogens, bacteria, and viruses are introduced through the inside of that tube, and then on the outside and partially on the inside of the tube are microbes which feed the immune system and where the microbiome exists. There's a hand in glove relationship between the gut bacteria, the bacteria in the gut lining, and the microbes in the microbiome. The microbiome constantly guides the activity based on what comes through that chute. It signals to the immune system and tells them, those cells of the immune system, what to do. What it comes down to then is that the gut microbiome, when barraged by bacteria and pathogens, the microbes of the microbiome, because the microbiome is full of bacteria, yeasts, funguses, something called archaea, one of the oldest known entities on our planet, and they're still current and in our gut, anaerobic entities. When those microbes, all part of the microbiome, decipher what is friend and what is foe, they go to work. You can't talk, and again I'll say this, you can't talk about the gut without talking about the microbiome and without talking about the immune system. They are completely interwoven. This can represent either underactivity in response to the immune system or overactivity of the immune system where everything is seen as a threat. Underactivity, it's not going to marshal the white blood cells to fight an illness very well or cope with any part of us that is damaged, and especially our infectious, the potential of infectious disease and viruses. But there's also overactivity. For example, when a autoimmune disease is involved, which infects 1 in 4 Americans. Also, overreaction can extend to, and some of us know people with autoimmune. I do. I have something called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Most underactive thyroids come about from Hashimoto's, and that's an autoimmune disease. Rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune. Sjogren's syndrome, Graves' disease. I could just go on and on. Lupus is an autoimmune disease. And it tends to be when somebody has one, they quite often have another, or another can show up very quickly because it means that's how the immune system is working. It's working on overdrive. Also, overreaction can extend to threats like overreaction to insect bites. I'll give you another example. I had been bitten by bees most of my life. One day I was bitten by a bee. It was a subterranean insect that looked just like a bee, and it hit me a couple of times on my forehead, and I went for my 45-minute walk that morning, and this was, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, and halfway there, I knew I was in real trouble because I was having a hard time breathing. My skin was bright red, and I got home and I was rushed to the doctor's office. It took 2 EpiPens because I was in anaphylaxis. Some of you have experienced that. That happened to me when I was 18 with sulfa drugs. So that overreaction can be from insect bites, it can be from medications, it can be from food like peanuts. My son had a friend that happened to again and again. If somebody would just breathe on him after eating a peanut butter sandwich. All of that is part of our immune reaction. And all of that is part of our gut, because 70 to 80% of our gut is tied into our immune system. I said that wrong. 70-80% of the gut is where our immune system resides. Although Dr. Chutkan's book focused on viruses, which is of course an ongoing hot topic, most of what is covered in that book and what we'll be talking about today has relevance in many other health threats, including cancers, some of which have been linked to viral origin. The truth be told, we cannot separate health at any level from our immune system and therefore from the microbiome. There are two theories behind disease. One is the germ theory, and that was popularized by Louis Pasteur. And the microorganisms known as pathogens or germs, and his theory is that the microorganisms that we call germs can lead to disease, and that we need to keep finding ways to kill the microorganisms. So we've all been running around with bacterial soaps and sprays and gels since COVID reared its ugly head over 2.5 years ago. But there's also something called terrain theory, and that was popularized by Antoine Béchamp. And that is that the state of the internal environment determines if germs cause disease rather than the germs being the sole cause of it. That terrain theory introduces the concept of the importance of the host health. Host health, that's an important concept, host health. It emphasizes that the things that we can do to protect ourselves, and that a healthy host can often manage illness and therefore recover. So Dr. Chutkan's book embraces the terrain theory. They both, meaning Rich Roll and Dr. Chutkan, both noted that during our struggles with the most talked about current virus, of course COVID, the germ theory was all that was promoted. Most of what we heard was about germ theory. Perhaps it wasn't politically correct or seen as a form of finger pointing to do otherwise. That wasn't part of the public health messaging during our worst times with COVID. There would have been value in spending some time with the terrain theory, what we could have done on many levels to prevent that sickness. And a little later I'll tell you the impetus for her getting so invested as a gastroenterologist in this subject. Becoming less susceptible and mediating the damage is something that could have been done if we understood a little more. And of course, hindsight is 20/20, so there's no blaming, there's no finger pointing, but boy, is it clear now. As it relates to host health, especially with gut health, evidence has been found that the state of the gut can actually predict outcomes. That's how important your microbiome is, your gut health is. Our beneficial bacteria, when fed well, will form metabolites that are called short-chain fatty acids. These short-chain fatty acids play a critical role in our health throughout our body and in every organ. For example, there's a Bacillobacterium prosnidii that's a beneficial microbe that resides in the colon. It's a butyrate-producing bacterium and has anti-inflammatory properties that promote gut health. F. prosnitzii, which is what it's shortened to, is a marker of a healthy bacteria or a microbiome. This is incredible, and this incredible and desirable bacterium has been associated with eating a lot of plant fibers. It produces large amounts of short-chain fatty acids that are known to be immunoprotective. In one study, high levels of F. prosnitzii has been shown to be 92% Start again. In one study, high levels of F. prosnitzii have been shown to be 92% predictive of positive outcomes, and low levels have been predictive of negative outcomes. Now think about that. If there was a test and you could go in and this was possible, and somebody could take a sample of the microbiome and look at what was in there, they would know what that host's health is and what dangers there are because of weaknesses in certain functions of the body based on what they find in the microbiome. Think about that. And those outcomes are, again, not just for COVID, but other health markers. To sum it up, there's a predictability in outcomes as it relates to host health, and host health is something that we can control. And more on that later. Another way to say this is that securing good health depends on avoiding dysbiosis. Dysbiosis is the disheveling, in other words, of our microbiome from healthy to one that is not working in unison, bacterium that are overflowing in the more harmful bacterium. Medications can be very disruptive, and now we're going to talk about the things that affect or disrupt or create dysbiosis. Medications can be very disruptive, like antibiotics. We've heard that a lot. The more antibiotics you use, the more it disrupts your gut, because what is an antibiotic? It kills bacteria. Well, what's predominantly in our gut? It's bacteria. Some people think, well, we'll just take our antibiotic and then just take probiotics. The problem with that is that there are thousands of species of microbes in our gut. Any given probiotic would touch just a portion of those, strengthening those few to the maybe sometimes disadvantage, in other words, creating an imbalance of others that are still very important, but maybe not as prolific. Medications can be very disruptive, such as NSAIDs, non-steroidal painkillers, immunosuppressant drugs, SSRIs, which are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, in other words, antidepressants, all of which affect the microbiome. And the thing that got her going in this direction back in 2020 was the protein pump inhibitor, the prevalence as a prescribed drug. She read a book about what medications do, and she read that the protein pump inhibitors, because protein pump inhibitors like Nexium, for example, they call them the little blue pill, but not Viagra, the little purple pills, little blue pills. They are incredibly successful in that they do what they're given to the host for, and that is they stop the production of stomach acid. Now think about this. We have stomach acid because it is there to do certain things: break down foods, make nutrients available, and it denatures the proteins of viruses. So in other words, our stomach acid protects us. Well, when people are prescribed because they have reflux, they eat too late at night, they have reflux, their acid's coming into their throat, they have pain because they're eating rich diets that their body doesn't break down well, too much fat, too much processed food, too much sugar, it's not being well absorbed, causes problems. The doctor says, we'll take care of that. We'll give you it's an antacid, but it's actually an acid blocker. It simply turns off the pump that produces acid. And that is incredibly damaging to our system in the way that we digest our food, in the way that we proceed in terms of the body's balance. And when Dr. Chutkan heard that when protein pump inhibitors have been prescribed for 4 months or more, the susceptibility to viruses goes sky high. And so she said, I would watch this as an active physician. She's an active physician, not just a blogger or a speaker. She said, I would watch these numbers of people going into hospitals and doing very, very poorly. And she said, I could almost predict that one of the proponents there in their inability to fight these viruses was that they were on protein pump acid pump inhibitors, the protein pump inhibitors. And she said, and absolutely that would be or proton pump inhibitors, and that would be the case. Let me get back to one of the most damaging is this, and she says it makes people very susceptible to virus invasion because it shuts down the acid pump in your stomach, and the acid denatures the viral proteins, just what I said. And it's responsible for much of the COVID illness, and yet there were no warnings. There was never anything said about this. She said, I even realized that most of my GI colleagues knew nothing about this. So that's when she started thinking, wait a minute, host health matters. The things we do mattered a lot, especially when we felt that we couldn't fight this virus with anything other than just sanitizing and fighting the germ itself. And then she brought up cough syrup. Cough syrup and antihistamines also alter our immune system primarily because, and this is so new to me, and this I thought was quite enlightening, because they block mucus production, which can disrupt the gut because most of the mucus is in our gut. Or most of the mucus is in our gut, and it acts as a way to grab and bind and move out pathogens. We need a mucosal layer. As a matter of fact, we have over 1 liter of mucus in our gut at any given time. And she said, think of it this way. It's part glue and part jello. In other words, it's a sticky matrix that grabs a hold of the junk that we don't want in there, pathogens, toxins, debris, metabolic debris, and pulls them along through the digestive system. She said, if you take cough syrup, you're breaking that mucus down. She even went as far as to say that people who have used, for example, these expectorants, cough syrups, antihistamines, have a very thin and watery mucus, that if they cough on someone, because if there is viral particle in there, it's not trapped in the mucus, it becomes that much more contagious. And people with a healthy mucus matrix, if they cough and their bacterium, their viruses are bound in that mucus, they're much less contagious. Isn't that interesting? And this isn't hypothetical. These are all studied results and proven to be so through research. And again, this has never been discussed. As a matter of fact, a lot of people don't know about it. Well, what we were told that was included with the conversations of, well, people with pre-existing conditions fare more poorly during COVID, we were told that as it relates to obesity as well. Obesity is one of the predictors of a negative outcome for COVID. Why? Because obesity causes dysbiosis. The microbiome of an obese person has an abundance of disruptive bacteria and a shortage of healthy bacteria. Fat cells are metabolically active and create inflammation. So even the existence of those fat cells will cause inflammation and will cause the production of some hormones like estrogen that are also dangerous in an overabundance in our system. In addition, they interfere with digestion. Research has shown that the microbes of an obese person are low in beneficial bacteria and high in pathogenic bacteria. Could be because of the food choices, as well as the inflammatory nature of the adipose fat and the fat cells that bring this about. Obesity has become so prevalent in our country, and we know that from the statistics. Is it 60 or 70% of our population is overweight, and something like 40% are obese? And well, I'll just read this rather than getting off track. It's become so prevalent that it's become a challenging topic, in that some even say that doctors have no right to bring it up to their patients. And yet, Dr. Chutkan pointed out from study results, you are 117% more likely to be hospitalized with COVID if obese. Also, the shedding of the virus after the infection, in other words, our ability to get rid of it, it took 40%, 42% longer if the patient was obese. This translates, especially when we had our more virulent strains. COVID SARS 2 was virulent. COVID SARS was at 5, was highly contagious, but not quite as damaging to us physically, even though it was still a dangerous virus. But especially in those times where we had the most destruction to our population, this really mattered. This translates to other diseases as well. How do we speak of such a sensitive topic that is construed as judgmentalism when it is so critical? This is not about blame or finger pointing or judgment. These are simple facts. Host health matters. This person that I was talking about in my family has, I'll say, fought obesity, or maybe accepted it for a good part of his life. Actually, the last 20, 30 years. And it just became a sort of a representation of his jolly nature. Ha ha ha, doesn't matter. And yet, now he's fighting mightily over the consequences and the difficulty of healing with all of that adipose tissue. And yes, host health matters. And his immune system is much weaker. There are all kinds of things cropping up. The last diagnosis now is diabetes, because his system can't fight this. It's hard. It's hard. Let's talk about a positive life, the positive lifestyle changes that we can adopt to protect our health. Let's start with what we put into our bodies, food. She quoted Michael Pollan in his book, In Defense of Food. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. She said that most importantly, we need to eat vegetables and as many as we can, because plant-based foods, meaning fiber-based foods, are the only foods of the microbiome. There is no animal product at all. No meat, no cheese, no dairy, no fish, no fat, no ice cream, no butter, no cream, no yogurt that will feed the microbiome. It takes up space, it gives us some calories, it gives us some nutrients, but the microbiome is not helped by that at all. It's plants and the plant fibers that feed the microbes that then create these colonies of F. prothnitzii and the other beneficial bacteria that give the microbiome the power to strengthen the immune system that then strengthens the body and protects us. She said, most importantly, we're looking for fibers that have inulins. Now, all fiber is important, but there's one in particular called inulins, like rolled oats, onions, garlic, asparagus, bananas, apples, artichokes, and most vegetables, that she describes as those kind of hard fibers, those stringy fibers. She said, make sure you're eating a stalk of celery every day, that the gut microbes love. They then can create the short-chain fatty acids that regulate the immune system and can actually affect every organ of the body in different ways and be disease mediators. She explained that she emphasizes more with her patients what they're missing than what they're eating. She says, in other words, if you're going to eat a pizza, if you're going to have the fried chicken, fine. But are you eating those foods, and plenty of them, that will produce the short-chain fatty acids that will focus your body's attention on its immune system and protect you when you need that protection? If not, and you may not be, because most Americans get their vegetables in the form of French fries and ketchup. And I'm not being sarcastic, but a lot of Americans, think of people you know. I can think of people who, when they consider vegetables on their plate, if it's a salad, it's iceberg lettuce, a cucumber, and a tomato. The cucumber and tomato is not bad, but the iceberg lettuce doesn't have that deep green. And what we're looking for the microbiome is all the colors of the rainbow, a variety of foods. If you can get 30 different plant foods in your diet in a week, and you can when you consider every different vegetable, every different herb, every color of those vegetables counting as another one, your cinnamon, your parsley, your turmeric, all of those count as another variety. We're looking to boost the microbiome with the plant material, the beans and legumes. Some people say, yes, but I can't get protein if I don't eat meat. No, no, no. We get them from grains. I've been completely plant-based for 4 years and never been healthier. I get all of my protein from my plants, including the seeds and nuts and grains and legumes. Okay, let me finish that sentence. So focus on the indigestible plant fibers that basically are the cellulose that holds plants together, and so you're going to find them in all of them. The foods, you can even look up inulin vegetables, fruits, vegetables with the most inulin. But bottom line, just eat plants whenever you can with whatever else you're eating to help protect you. Fiber and fermented foods are the main ingredients to recreating a healthy microbe. To ideally avoid sugar, processed foods, alcohol, red meats, fatty foods, especially saturated fats, and artificial sugars. And I've said this anytime you've heard me talk, and that is that if you don't like those things, this person I'm talking about doesn't like vegetables and beans and grains. The love is these things that I've just read: processed foods, red meats, fatty, saturated fatty foods, and animal products. The heavier the better. The thing is, you get used to whatever you eat. You fall in love with whatever you eat. It just takes a bit of neuroadapting. And I'll leave it at that because that's another conversation. Reiterating the value of eating more plants, even among those of us who are plant-based and have perhaps become too enamored with the processed or refined grain-based plant foods. She said, I can't stress enough simply upping our addition of vegetables to our plates and high fiber whole foods, especially the stringy fibers. They will help patch the permeability in your gut if that gut lining has become too open from the foods that cause it to become weak, and we get what they call leaky gut. and prevent leaky gut, and the effect of our gut or on our gut and producing valuable short chain fatty acids make it essential to your health. This represents the foundation that we're building in our body for long-term health. A proliferation of studies show that a whole food plant-based diet is best for the healthy microbiome. That means carbohydrates, as opposed to being feared, because plant-based foods are basically a starchy food, whether it's a leaf of lettuce, there is starch there, or the ones that are clearly starches, like the sweet potatoes and beans and grains. That means carbohydrates, as opposed to being feared, should be embraced. They're from, as long as they're from whole food sources, and do look for that. There's a big difference between wheat bread and whole wheat bread. Wheat bread, first ingredients will be enriched flour. Now that means they took the wheat berry, they broke it all up, they took the inside starch called the endosperm, threw away the wheat germ, threw away the wheat bran, and you're getting a processed food that goes straight to the what we call dopamine receptors. In other words, it's like eating sugar. It's a pure starch. And it's not feeding the microbiome. There's nothing there for the microbiome. If that bread starts with whole wheat, whole rye, whole barley, whole quinoa, then you're looking at something that will feed the microbiome. So you got to read some labels for that. Okay, so eating whole foods, that's where the fiber comes from. So what are some of the other things besides food? How about sleep? A lack of sleep can cause dysbiosis. Lack of sleep opens us up wide to the invasion of viral infections. A shocking statement that with less than 4 hours of sleep in a night, the immunity to a virus the next day is over 60% weaker. I was really surprised by that. One night of 4 hours or less can increase your chance by 62% of being infected by a virus. 25% increase of heart attacks were documented, and this has been shown over and over, the day after we have daylight savings time. It's another example of our sensitivity to a lack of sleep. In addition, 70 to 80% of our serotonin is created in the gut, and the serotonin is related to the reduction of melatonin, which is what our body uses, the hormone that allows us to sleep and then sleep well. So this is an important subject. Sleep for your microbiome, for your immunity, and quite frankly, for mental health. That's the way we process our brain's activity from one day to the next. It's at night when it's processed and sort of filtered, and I'll call it categorized. The information is categorized at night. Okay, more on sleep. If a person is sleep deprived within 48 hours of getting a vaccine, it can dramatically interfere with the effectiveness of the vaccine. Again, our immune system is that much weakened by a lack of sleep. A vaccine of any kind. And so she was using the example of her daughter who was on a rowing team, a regatta, and they were getting up at 4 a.m. To go and row, and going to sleep late because of studies the night before, and she was going to go in and get her flu vaccine, and Dr. Chutkan said, no, you're not. You go to your regatta, you get up at 4 a.m, but you wait until you get a good night's sleep, couple of days of good night's sleep before you get that vaccine. Thought that was interesting. And then what about stress management, the importance of stress management? Stress, although intermittent stress, can create resilience and can be good for our bodies, such as intermittent fasting. I talk about that on other podcasts. Heat and cold therapy, intense exercise, all of that can be good if it's short term, if it's a acute, and if it brings out the stress response to throw at those stressors some of our immunity, some of our immune cells, and actually kind of gets them regulated to do that, but not if it's ongoing and long term. Stress that's ongoing and long term disrupts our entire system. We have to learn to mediate that. That's another talk. Meditation, mindfulness, reframing our thoughts. But it's very important to understand that if your life is day to day, ongoing, relentless stress, it has as much damage to your body through the microbiome and through your immune system as somebody pouring germs down your throat. Uh, it is worth what it takes to mitigate that. Pay attention to it, in other words. And then, are you familiar with a term that I wasn't, and I just love this? It's called the open air factor. This is something that we can do to make ourselves happier, and it is getting outdoors and getting outside. This is what I'm saying to my loved one in the hospital. Please get out of that room. First of all, get off your back. It's terrible to be on your back, especially with a lot of weight pushing against the lungs. It will make you weaker. It'll make you more susceptible to all those germs around a hospital. But also, just get someone to take you outside. Get in a wheelchair and go outside and sit outside. And this is why. Okay. Exposure to nature affects the microbiome. Something that was this was something that was discovered during the Spanish flu that was in the early 1900s, the Spanish flu epidemic that killed so many people, and it was labeled the open air factor. There's a in open air there's a germicidal constituent that is part of the atmosphere. Patients who are outdoors recovered at a much greater rate and more quickly than those who were not. In other words, officers who got the better beds inside had 40% mortality rate, and the enlisted men who were on cots in open air, and this was in the 1919s, and that was during wartime, and that's why we're using this example. Listed men on cots in open air hallways or outside had 13% mortality from the Spanish flu. Huge difference. And the difference was the availability of fresh, clean air. So it's best to be out in nature, out in the woods, out in a park, among plants and trees. But in any way we can get fresh air, we're improving our microbiome. Even if it means being inside with the windows open, it matters. Something she calls that germicidal constituent, open air factor. Keep those two upmost in your mind. Get outside, even get a little dirty. The dirt is actually good for your microbiome in most cases. Okay. For me, the most important takeaway here is the reiteration of the fact that we have to take responsibility for our health. If we don't, others can't necessarily fix or help us. There was so much more here in this conversation that I left on the table. As Rich Roll said about her new book, it's not just an academic pursuit to further understand the microbiome. It's a hands-on tutorial for what we can do to lengthen and enrich our lives in quality and in health. There's even recipes in the book. I think I mentioned that. That's all I wanted to say about that. I've been, again, shaken to the core because I've realized that it doesn't matter what I do or what I believe and what I know, which makes it really hard to watch somebody not do what's especially good for them. It comes down to each individual's determination. I'll say first understanding that it is in our hands, that it is in our control to make decisions in a number of ways. lifestyle, the things we eat, the things we take, the things we do, breathing fresh air, de-stressing, getting sleep, eating whole foods. It's the things that we do that can allow us to live lives that are strong and productive, fun, playful, joyful, healthy, immersive in the world. If we take care of ourselves and make those good decisions. The alternative is no fun at all, especially when you're living it. Have a great day, because I know I am. Push subscribe if you're not subscribed to my channel. And thank you for taking the time to hear this. And I've attached the link to the full 2-hour and 17-minute interview if you'd like to hear it. I think it's very well worthwhile. I listened, 2.5 times? And each time I heard it, I heard what I hadn't heard the first time. Have a great day.